A very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and my special guest is recently appointed Senator and first-time Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, Senator the Honourable Chad Blackman. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Now, before we get into your new role, you have recently returned from an extensive international career. You would have served as ambassador to the United Nations at Geneva, Vienna, and Rome, ambassador to Switzerland, Serbia, Austria, and Hungary, and more recently as director and senior advisor to the Director General of the International Labour Organization. So let me just ask straight up, how do you think your global experience can assist Barbados at this time?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming to interview. And relative to your question, I really think that being abroad for the last 6 years in the last instance really allows for me to, one, have a very global perspective on things, how the world works, what are the issues facing not just small states like Barbados, but also how is the global economy coming together, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. And therefore, being abroad and having the international career, you would have been able to pick up understanding of how that global architecture is working, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and therefore coming back to Barbados, you have a clearer understanding as to not only what those challenges are on Barbados, but how can you use that knowledge to navigate on behalf of the country. The second tier to that question would be the persons that I would have met over the last 6 years, for example, when you would have worked with ambassadors who in many respects are now ministers of their country, some of them are now heads of government or heads of state, you then really get to be able to be in a position that you can, if need be, pick up the phone on behalf of the country. And because of the relationships developed, be able to use that on behalf of Barbados. But I also want to go further. Oftentimes, you would have persons coming from domestic politics and going abroad and offering their skill set. But I believe being able to have been in the international space, focusing on areas, for example, of trade, health, industrialization, agriculture, and now being able to bring that experience into Barbados, I believe that it allows for us to really now move the agenda, knowing what is coming in the international space, and equally, being able to harness the necessary skills at the local level to be able to deploy as we go forward. So I think that that experience allows me a very unique opportunity to see what our priorities are as Barbados, whilst at the same time at the back of my mind knowing how the international landscape works and how the two can mesh.
And prior to these 6 years, you would have spent about 8 years in the UK. How difficult has it been to readjust to life at home?
Well, first of all, home is always going to be home. But yes, it's been a readjustment in terms, for example, of speed of doing things. But because I never really left, even though I was living abroad, I would always come back to Barbados. Particularly when I was ambassador, I would always be here for different meetings, one way or the other. But it allows for the ability to really see both sides of the world and to see, you then get a fresh perspective on things here, both challenges and opportunities. And because of that, I have a view that I think I can make a significant contribution in trying to help the country to navigate some of the landmines, as it were, that are going to be coming in the future relative to issues of work, relative to issues of the economy, technology, etc. So it invariably is the best of both worlds, if I should put it like that.
Interesting that you mentioned work, and we're seeing quite a bit of industrial action on the island at the moment. We have sick buildings, we have employers not following due process. And while it is not your current area of focus, you did spend quite some time at the ILO. So given where we are at this point in time, there is an urgent need to implement best practices in the workplace.
I can agree with you more. And let me start invariably on the premise of standards. Our country, no country in the world, but let's focus on Barbados and by extension the region. Our country cannot afford to move forward and advance the cause of workers' rights and standards without looking at ensuring that what are the minimum thresholds that we are going to agree to ensure that people not only have work, but as a big theme in the ILO, is decent work. And what do I mean by decent work? Anyone can have a job, but there has to be a set of standards that we agree to, that they come to work and they can enjoy their benefits, they can enjoy their rights, and that the work is not in a situation causing them to be disadvantaged whilst they're doing so. And in the current environment, I think we have a seminal moment in our history to be able to reposition Barbados as a country that is not only prosperous for business, and because we have a lot of businesses here that are doing very well, we have to ensure that the workers who support the businesses and the workers who cause the businesses to thrive and enjoy profits, that their rights have to be respected and honored. And so, for example, when you look at the current labor clauses bill, it is an incredible piece of soon-to-be legislation, as it were, that allows for the workers to have a certain set of standards that allows for them to have their rights guaranteed. Because you can't have a situation where, as I mentioned, that companies are doing well, but the rights of workers, for example, in the hotels are being not lived up to. That is not fair. And in the context of social justice, Barbados is a country around the world that is championing the issue of social justice to climate change. We're championing the issue around the world of social justice through the call for the reform in the international financial sector. But we also have to ensure that all workers, regardless of where you're from, that when you go to work, that you are guaranteed by law to have a minimum standard that allows for you to have your dignity, to have your rights respected, and also it helps the country to be also very competitive. And I'll explain to you why. There is a movement around the world, particularly in the international labor context, that businesses, believe it or not, are actually looking to do business in jurisdictions that have a set of values of sustainability and labor rights. When you look at the post-COVID reality, where a number of persons would have been dislocated as a result of the pandemic, more and more there is a demand for workers to be able to have their rights guaranteed. And jurisdictions that have proven through legislation and practice as well that they will respect the rights of their workers, you're now starting to see those destinations and jurisdictions becoming more and more in demand as a place to do business. And why? The values matter, and we can't divorce capital from values. And therefore, we have to ensure as Barbados that we don't take this for granted. And when you look at the history of the Labour Party, for example, the party started by Grantley Adams. It was started on the basis that there was a lot of labor unrest. There were a lot of challenges relative to the rights or lack thereof of workers. And therefore, when you see right now that the government has been ensuring that the rights of workers are on the forefront, there's no surprise, therefore, that we have to accept that we cannot divorce those rights from the business community, saying to the workers, you work for us, yes, we enjoy growth, but you have to be guaranteed those rights. So I think we have a seminal moment in our history to ensure that we do right by the workers. And let's face it, when you look at what's proposed in the bill, if you are doing right by workers, you have nothing to worry about. But if you're not doing right by workers, then that is where there's going to be a problem. And by problem, what do I mean? That is when the trigger comes in. And I find it hard to believe that anyone can justify not standing by workers. This country, built on tourism within the last 40 years, for example, we have to ensure that our number one sector that drives the economy has a minimum threshold of standards that ensures that the people who are building not only the back of the tourism sector, but by virtue of that sector being our lead income earner, that those persons are guaranteed standards, because it affects everyone. I'm sure we all have family, friends, relatives, and neighbors who work in these industries. But it's not just about tourism, it's about workers across the board. And what will Barbados be known for? What do we stand for? It is really an issue of our value system. Workers must be protected. Of course, businesses must also be competitive. But you cannot be competitive in a situation where those competitive practices is to the detriment of the worker. And therefore, as a government, the government has taken a very firm decision that workers must be protected. But equally, this is not something that is going to go against the business community. It's not a workers versus business. It's actually complementary. But at the principle core of it, what it is saying is that you cannot have your practices not in line with the rights and expect that you can benefit.
Minister, I hear you, and I don't want to disadvantage you because I know that the upper chamber has not had the pleasure of debating this bill as yet, but this bill has come under some heavy criticism.
You're right, it has, and I think a lot of it is also based on not being, some persons not really reading the bill and what it's entailing. And I can tell you, once you read it, you will see that at its core, there's nothing to disadvantage entities or companies, as it were. Because no one can justify, if you can find someone that can justify taking away the rights of workers in terms of companies, and they can say to you that there's a justification for doing so, then they are clearly not. They ought not to be in business. And therefore, the point I'm making is, and the point that the government has been making, is that what this is simply doing is to bring together a number of practices over the years that have been done through convention, but bringing it now into a codified manner in offering through legislation and law that guarantee. So there's nothing new, but you're putting it into a body now backed by law and not by convention. Because there are some companies, not all, the majority were doing the right thing, but there were some companies, and there are some companies, who have been taking advantage of the workers. And now the government has said, enough is enough. This is Barbados. This is a country built on the backs of poor, ordinary people throughout centuries. We know our history with slavery. And how can we, on the eve of the 400th year of when we were first colonized, be not looking to ensure that we can empower our Barbadians to have a proper and decent set of work? And when you look, for example, at the fact that we are a country who pride ourselves on social justice, on equity, on fairness, we have no choice but to do what is right.
Minister, I know I started by saying that labor is not your area of focus, but we needed to discuss it because we cannot speak about economic growth and investment and not bring in the fact that labor has an effect on productivity. And we hear oftentimes about low productivity in Barbados because basically we have a lot of low morale. And this also extends outside of the private sector into government and the civil service.
No, you're right in that regard, that there has to be, at one, a high level of productivity, and there needs to be a high level of efficiency through high morale. In my view, how do you address morale? People, first of all, if we look at Singapore, and I hate to often use them as the reference point, but I think they have a model that works. When you look at how they run, I think first of all, you have to get all workers, whether it be in the private sector, government sector, as you said, understanding what is the vision of the country, where are we trying to go, where are we going to be in the next 50 years? And when you can start to get people to think, okay, this is my role on how we get there. Remember once there was that saying, tourism is our business, let's play our part. I believe now we have to use that principle, but change it. Barbados' development is our business, let's play our part. So whether you're in the tourism sector, whether you're in the sports sector, journalism, the legal sector, the arts, it doesn't matter. Everyone must now understand this is my role. Now, when you unpack that and you go deeper, there has to be standards that allow for persons when they're working to understand not only what is their role, but this is my contribution, and this is the environment that I have to work in. Employers also have a role in ensuring that their workers and generally people who are doing business have the right environment to thrive and succeed relative to issues of relative to training. Sometimes persons have jobs, but they haven't been trained in a long time. And therefore, what is being asked of them and what is their skill set, there's a gap. How do you close that gap? Those things lead to frustration, and frustration for the employer, and by virtue, sometimes frustration for the employee. But equally, people also need to be able to have opportunities to grow within their careers. And if you don't have a sense that you can grow where you are, it leads to frustration. So I think once we can start to unpack those things and really have a comprehensive way of treating to them, people's morales will go. Second of all, efficiency. We have a lot of processes, and I can tell you even in government as well, and I use this opportunity to give credit to the Prime Minister, where she's asked government to reconstruct and deconstruct. What do I mean by that? A lot of the things that we have, for example, in our books and processes are done sometimes in ways that were done 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they're still in our mode of operation today. But how can that be in a 2024, a Barbados that exists in a world that ought to be competitive, that it is competitive, and therefore some of these things bear no resemblance on today's reality. So when you reconstruct, you have to reconstruct in a way that makes operations fit for purpose, and therefore when you can see that moving into a progressive set of operations, people then become more motivated. They feel part of change. But equally, I must be honest with you, oftentimes transformation and the necessary transformation and change and progress is not comfortable because sometimes people are, oftentimes rather, in a comfort zone. But I think once you have those issues addressed, you then see morale boosted, productivity, and efficiency. And once you can get that tapped into at the level of this is where I want to see my country go, or this is where the country is going, this is my role, the environment is conducive to all of those three areas that I mentioned, the level of productivity and output would be unimaginable. And I think, therefore, we have a seminal moment as a country to get on board. And one of the things I want to throw out there too, that we have to have one single thing or a few things. But I think if we can have a target, but let's say 2040, this is my personal view, where we say this is how we want Barbados to be by 2040, and we work backwards. And you give everybody a framework of where, capture the imagination of the country and say this is where we need to be. I think people will be inspired, because when you are inspired to achieve something, you often go into overdrive. Adrenaline starts to kick in. But if it's business as usual, you have nothing to motivate you to do it. So I like to liken our development, and perhaps allow me to go into that. I like to liken our development in the first 50, 55 years of our existence as a nation, an independent nation, like a bakery. So in the first 50 years, 55 years, we've had X ingredients and we've made a sweet bread, known to everybody in Barbados. But post 55, we have to now use those same ingredients because God has given us a finite set of national resources, whether it be our people, or size, or logistics, or location. But how do we reorder those ingredients to make something new, whether it be a rock cake, a currant slice? You get my point. I'm breaking it down so that people can really understand what I'm saying is we have all the necessary ingredients to be a world-class country. All. But it's how do we reorder all of what we have? How do we get our people to say, okay, you have this skill set. You have this skill set, but it has been tailored in a way that isn't making you happy. It isn't coming to bring the output that's necessary for our demands. And we now have to find a way to maximize your skills. And therefore, when you look at education and the ongoing education reform, it is going to be critical. And I'll tell you why. The world out there, the future of work, going back to labor a bit, the future of work in the next 10, 20, 30 years will not look like what we've known for the last 10 to 50 years. And therefore, it will mean that what is required for us to be able to meet those new demands will require a change in education. It will require a change in the way education is delivered and even what is on the curriculum. Our people will need to become more competitive in terms of foreign languages. Our people will need to be more competitive in terms of analytical thinking. And also, I think Barbados has a unique opportunity, particularly given that same education system, that we must become the global hub for ideas. Our young people must be encouraged to think, what is there around the world that needs a solution? And our education system, from primary, secondary, and particularly tertiary, must be an environment and conduit for them to create those ideas, put it to market, and those markets and those ideas, are backed by intellectual property so that you protect the idea. And the amount of revenue that can be made for our people and the foreign exchange, because of you're exporting a service, which is your idea, coming back into the economy of Barbados will be tremendous. And that is where, we have to have a knowledge-based economy, an economy that is based on research and development. But what it will require is also funding. And the financing of that will require significant levels of funding. So therefore, our private sector has to work with the government, and also we have to develop a strong philanthropic sector, volunteering. not just volunteering in terms of, for example, activities, but how do we get entities and charities to also tap into that development thrust of where our people need to go. So I've given you that perspective so that you can see, if we talk about productivity, if we talk about efficiency, it also has to lead to a long-term development strategy for Barbados, to put Barbados as one of the most sophisticated countries on earth, but not just to tick a box and say we're the number one in the world just because. It must redound to the ordinary man on the street, who, by way of being born here or coming here, residing here, Barbados must be that safe conduit, an environment that allows for people's potential to be tapped into in ways never imagined before. But I think I know we have what it takes to do it, but it's just really the reordering of things that we can do to get that.
You mentioned young people and training them and the opportunities that are out there, but a lot of our young people, after they have received their education, they're leaving Barbados for opportunities because they feel stifled here.
You're right, and it's one thing that we have to address, and the thing is, of course, it's not started now. Unfortunately, it's been going on for a long time. But how do we address that? Again, what are our national priorities? What does the country need to be able to provide for itself and to provide for growth? And therefore, when you take that stance and the realignment of what is needed for everyone to prosper, and you revamp the education system, first of all, not just to have certifications, because I must admit, our citizens have a high level of certifications, whether that be CXCs, O levels, CAPE, degrees, masters, PhDs. You can't touch Barbados when it comes to that. But how do you get those same people now to think, okay, what are the global opportunities for business? Taking those ideas. And we mustn't only place emphasis on, for example, the traditional degrees, but TVET and that training. Again, there has to be a rethinking of where we go. So in order to keep a lot of the skill sets, and most of our skill sets here, once we can have a clear idea as to where we are going as a country and what we need to be able to prosper, you will have more people staying here and finding opportunities. But I also want to use the opportunity to say that we must not only see ourselves, in order to be a global citizen, the Barbadian global citizen must not only see Barbados as the place to earn. Technology has allowed for us now to stay here and offer services around the world. So therefore, as you build out those global opportunities, you should be able to stay here. So for example, to the government's credit, and I thank Prime Minister Motley for that vision as well, when you look at the welcome stamp, coming out of the bosoms of COVID, where we now have a jurisdiction where people can come to Barbados once you have internet connectivity, which we have a fantastic network, and you can work here and offer your service around the world. It therefore means we have a platform and a proven model that allows for people here to offer their skills globally. But we have to go further. We have a CARICOM market, and I want to really say, even now particularly as Minister for Economic Affairs, we must use the fact that we have a strong currency and make it work for us, particularly across the region, particularly across the world. And as we look, for example, not only in the CARICOM market, but the African market, the Barbadian dollar and the purchasing power is incredibly strong. How do we get our young people, not just young people, our business class, to spot the global opportunities while staying in Barbados, but having mergers, having acquisitions? I know for a long time we've been risk averse when it comes to business. That has to change. And how do I propose to change it? We have to expose them. The best way to learn a foreign language, for example, is not just staying at home, but to go into the market and learn a language. The best way, as some people say, to swim is to, and I'm not advocating this, is to throw you in the water and you learn to swim. The point I'm making is we have to get our people to be less risk averse by exposing them. And one of the things I propose is for us to have our young people over time, and this is something that I want to put to the government, between the ages of 15, 16 to 18, we should have a program, government, private sector partnership, where those young people for 3 months, they go around the world and they stay, for example, in different metropoles, whether it be Tokyo, whether it be Rwanda, whether it be Switzerland, South Africa, 3 months, and understand how those countries and cities work in the different sectors that they have. And then when they come back to Barbados, they download, as it were, those ideas and patronize those ideas. And what you're doing is now building out one, a generation of young people who are global citizens. They understand how the world works. They've experienced it, they've touched it, they've felt it. And two, we are now bringing different perspectives around the world here and building out our economy in a significant way that we've never done before. So again, it goes back to what I said to you about reordering how we see development. Yes, there are external challenges and external shocks that will cause us to have to sometimes retweak how we move forward. But I know we have the capabilities to do it.
Minister, in his recent report, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Kevin Greenidge, spoke about the need for the country to increase its levels of foreign investment if we are to see continued growth. Now, as Minister with responsibility for investment, what are some of the strategies that you intend to employ to see this?
Well, I can tell you simply put, what we have to do is to continue to maintain our current markets that we go after. So, for example, North America, Europe, those traditional markets. But equally, Africa, the Arab world, and Asia. There's a lot of growth taking place in those regions. And therefore, part of this strategy will be through Invest Barbados, and I want to use the opportunity to praise the good work that they're doing, is to look at those markets and to see where are the growth areas, but equally, not just going after growth through investment in a random way, but matching foreign investment to our domestic priorities. And that's going to be critical, because there are a number of areas that the country, our country, Barbados, has to build out in order for us to continue to grow. And the foreign investment, therefore, must match. But specifically, let's focus, for example, on Africa. Africa has 54 countries. And you would have seen over the last, well, for the time Prime Minister Motley's administration has come to office, the strong deepening of relations with the continent. There's a reason for that. Africa continues to grow. Let's take, for example, West Africa, ECOWAS. You have Nigeria, you have Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and those are areas of growth that allow for us to tap into, because we have the history with them. Often we have language connectivity there. And when you really look at what they're doing with their economies and the fact that Barbados have a high level of skills that those economies need, tremendous opportunity for our persons here to tap into are critical. But on the inward side, on the investment side, Africa and its wealth is significant, and we cannot underestimate that. And therefore, the strategy will be to continue to build out our diplomatic relations, and two, how do we encourage, how do we encourage those entities on the continent to see Barbados as the country of choice for doing business. And therefore, it will require a number of things, and I want to mention, for example, through the Ministry of Tourism International Transport, we're looking at a number of air service agreements that will ensure that persons from the continent can come to Barbados directly, both for tourism and investment. And I'll explain to you why. If you can unlock that market or those markets where persons can come to Barbados without having to go through Europe or the US to get here, the level of inflows will be significant for doing business. The government, to its credit, have removed visas for countries on the continent. But if you do that and you have your services agreement, but persons still have to fly, it makes no sense. And therefore, the government is looking to have a number of airlines to bring airlift into Barbados, and therefore allowing, Barbados to be the hub in which persons can come and do business, for travel and business as well. But equally, we mustn't only look at foreign investment from the point of view of outside of the region. There is still CARICOM that presents us a fantastic opportunity for inward investments. So it's a multi-tiered strategy that we're going to be deploying, focusing on really ensuring that new markets continue to see Barbados as a place to do business as well.
For the benefit of the public, if you could just list those African nations that we have signed agreements with.
Yes, so there are a number of different types of agreements, but I can tell you, of course, we had the recent visit of President of Senegal. We have with Ghana, we have with Kenya, Rwanda. And those, for example, and Morocco, I must admit, and those countries, as I said, are enjoying high levels of growth. And I really want to use this opportunity to also encourage Barbadians to start to look online and see what are the opportunities in those markets. Because what you then realize, so I'll give you an example. For a number of years, Barbadians, we've enjoyed the benefit and technology of solar water heaters here. And during the visit of the Senegalese here, the president and his team mentioned that there is a high boom in construction in Senegal. But a lot of the entities and households and even hotels, they're still using to heat their water. Having to do it in a way that is using, for example, electricity or other methods. So when they found out that Barbados was a pioneer of solar water, they said, here's an opportunity for Barbadians to also go there and to offer their goods and service, both literally in terms of the solar water heater and also the application of that to that market. So it will require for us to, as I said, look across the landscape to see where are the opportunities in Africa and how do we get our businesses to go. But equally, we need to also start to promote Barbados and the region, and I want to make this case as well, in the continent. If we're to have critical mass, and we're talking about investment, investors, bottom line, they want return on their investment. And given our small size, population of roughly 300,000 people, a foreign investor, whilst Barbados has all of the hallmarks of a fantastic jurisdiction, if we start to promote the region a lot more, it brings critical mass and economies of scale. And therefore, when we're talking about inward flows and outward flows, we have to start promoting the region as well, and the African region in both areas, and the amount of growth that you will start to see will be significant. So again, it will call for us to rethink how we also promote our jurisdictions, not only as one country, but as a region that is ready to do business with the continent.
And I'm glad that you mentioned a return on investments, because many times we hear about these agreements, and there are many, but when it's time for Barbadians to see tangible benefits, we hear crickets. What kind of confidence should Barbadians have in these agreements?
No, I can tell you they should have a high level of confidence. There's a saying in the international trade community, and that's my background, international trade, that you can have as many bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements, but agreements don't cause trade to happen. It facilitates it. It is the private sector, it is the people on the ground who have to now spot the opportunity. And therefore, I do accept that there's a role that governments have to play in not only formulating and negotiating the agreements, but they have to do a lot of promotion of those agreements and explaining to people in simple terms, what is it in it for you? How can you benefit? And therefore, you move from not only having agreements, you have conversation, and you massage, and you promote, and you promote, and you promote. I think that's what's going to do it. And it goes back to what I said to you earlier. If you can capture people's imagination, and you can get them to see down the road and around the corner, you're not going to have to tell them what to do. They will come up with ways that we couldn't even think about. And I think that's where we have to get our people now. So yes, the government has a role in terms of going out there and spotting the opportunities from a diplomatic perspective, yes. But after you do that, or whilst you're doing that, you should promote. But I also go further to consultation, even through the negotiation phase, is going to be key. Because you don't want to negotiate something that sector or sectors don't have an understanding of where it's going. And then you pass an agreement, or you come to an agreement rather, and then it's not what's in the collective interest. So there have to be different tiers of the strategy. But we must also, as I said, move beyond just having an agreement, but beyond the agreement, promote what's the benefit, walk with people and guide them. And it can't be a one-off. It has to be a systematic strategy of helping people to see that. And that will also come through technology, TV. It will come through telephones, Instagram. We need to get our people to see Africa, the Arab world. Historically, we've always looked north. And there's nothing wrong with looking north, but it must not be the only destination in our minds of what success is and where opportunities are. And therefore, even on the aspect of education, going back to it again, I look forward to the day where our people can conceive going to South Africa to study as a first or second or third choice outside of KFL. And not necessarily thinking in order for me to be a successful international citizen, I have to study in the global north. But it calls therefore for a reshift in the thinking of what is success, what is a global standard of success, and therefore South-South cooperation, and the belief that the global South has what it takes to be world class. We have to now get our people thinking in that. And that is also what's going to drive inward investment and outward investment, because people invest where they think there are opportunities. And those opportunities are often wrapped in the cloud of mystique, what you see on TV, what you see on social media. And therefore, we have to now retell our story. Look at it, for example. Which country invented rum? Barbados. World's greatest cricketer? Barbados. The world's greatest icon and now business mogul? Rihanna, Barbados. The country that invented and grafted the grapefruit. Whether you go to Tesco's in the UK or you're in Switzerland and you see a grapefruit, that was a Barbadian invention by John Redmond Bevelle. We have the ingredients, again, as I said, to be world class. But it's now, how do we not just get Barbados, but all the countries around the world who have different comparative advantages of success, and to get their citizens and their governments thinking, we need to repackage this as this is where we can do business, this is where we can live. And you're going to see over time a shift in what we can do in terms of business, in terms of tourism, in terms of growth. And I really would like to see, and I'm going to use the opportunity whilst I'm as Minister of Economic Affairs to get Barbadians to think of economic opportunities, not in just the traditional sense, but to become forecasters and spotters of, okay, this is where the opportunities are. Let's mobilize our young people to go in that direction. I think that's part of my role.
I know we have to take an opportunity to take a short break. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
Welcome back as we continue our chat with the Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, Senator the Honorable Chad Blackman. Minister, many times when I do interviews, interviewees sometimes give me guesstimates simply because up-to-date statistics are not available. Now, as the world moves further into the realm of data and the need for stats, how do you see the Barbados Statistical Service playing a critical role?
Let me tell you, the Statistical Service and their role cannot be understated. I'll tell you why. In order for Barbados and countries, but let's of course focus on Barbados, to have sound policy, to provide the necessary goods and services for its citizens and people, to be able to predict what resources you have or will need to be able to deliver on infrastructure, you name it. You need credible and you need sound data, and you need sound statistics. So I also want to commend the Barbados Statistical Service for their work and what they're doing, because it has allowed and continues to allow the country to prepare and plan in terms of policy. But there's some challenges, of course, and I'll give you an example. We have field officers who go into the field to do surveys, but because you can't force entities or persons to respond to those surveys, it therefore means that you don't necessarily get the entire picture that is necessary. And I want to use this as an opportunity to really say to persons in Barbados, companies and individuals alike, please cooperate with the field officers in providing that data, because it allows for, one, to get a broad and clear picture, but two, it allows for government to be able to plan as well. And three, those statistics aren't only for government, it's for the wider society and the economy. And therefore, the country can then rely on data that is credible and that is done in a way that we can see what is necessary based on what's happening on the ground. So it's really something that we have to move forward with. But the team that we have in the service, they're very, very, very skilled. And I've actually had some discussions with them. And they're moving in the direction really where they want to reposition the service to be one, not just of the best in the Caribbean, but they've given the bold view of being one of the best in the world. And I intend to really work with them, providing the necessary training and capacity building and the tools that are necessary for us to have a world-class service. So I think, as I said, we can't really underscore enough the importance of the service to Barbados.
As a country, however, do we understand the value of data?
I don't think we do enough. When you look at large metropole countries, those countries, not just government, but private sector entities are driven by data. And therefore, we're moving now in the realm of having big data and collecting of it. Because if we can get that right, Barbados and by extension, countries in the region will be able to tap into some areas that we've not been able to do before. And data is a very, very important thing, as you can imagine. So even when you talk about forecasting, you can't do it without the requisite data. So therefore, we have to now get our people to understand. And it will take a lot of promotions and promotional activities through social media, traditional media, and discussions and helping our people to reacquaint themselves with data and its importance. And these are the conversations that I think that the Ministry of Economic Affairs can have with our people. And not just through modes like this, but everything can also be done via telephone. That's where people are at. So we have to now find ways to get people to understand where the country is going through mobile communication.
There are a number of major projects that the government undertakes with international partners, and your ministry, through its project implementation unit, is the engine behind this. Can you tell us what is in store to ensure that these projects are implemented on time?
I think the key to that is really efficiency. And already, I mean, I've been here now a couple of weeks, but I can tell you that we've had meetings where you get to see a clear picture of the systems. If you don't have a system that allows for you to see where at any given time a project is in its life cycle, then even though you have the best intentions in the world, you often then miss targets. And it now has to come into the realm of technology. And that's where the ministry has been going and is going, in particular the unit that you mentioned. And once you can start to get that inefficiency in the process, you can start to unlock so many areas of growth. And therefore, a lot of the projects that the country is looking to undertake, both in terms of infrastructural developments, for example, or technical assistance with other countries, the project implementation unit plays a significant role in doing that. But as I said, it is really about streamlining the processes, using automation and technology, and moving away from, for example, paper. Or if someone is not there at work today for whatever reason, these things are stalled. But if you go the route of automation, digitization, you now have a very real-time process that allows for anyone at any given time to take it up and move forward. So I can't stress that enough. Efficiency is key in order to ensure that projects coming on time, quick and timely responses. Underscoring that is efficiency. And as I said, I've seen it in the international world when it comes to large projects. That is the bedrock of ensuring that these things are done in an effective manner.
On the economic side of your ministry, how do you foresee the research department working to address a number of issues?
Let me start by saying that the economic team in the research department, they have a higher level of skills. And since I've come in, I've been able to sit with them. And they also have been able to share a vision as how they see the department being reimagined and repositioned. That's the first thing. The second bit of that, building on that, is that I see the research team and the department really helping not just me, but the entire country to be able to spot what are the economic opportunities, not just in Barbados, but around the world. And based on credible research, forecasting, bringing the relevant information to government to be able to say, here is the information. So let's take, for example, a challenge that I've thrown out actually. to the team. I mentioned to you before the issue of competitiveness. And part of that limb is foreign languages. But we've never saw as a country to quantify what is the economic value and how does it tie into competitiveness of if we had a bilingual or multilingual society. We've never done it. And therefore, what they're now working on, for example, is to put in terms of the economic numbers what that would look like. So therefore, Barbados, without that competitive advantage of being a multilingual society in economic terms, and Barbados, if we are bilingual society, multilingual society, and different tiers, so that it gives now the government and the country and the people an understanding that you can now say, okay, here is the information that the economic team has done, and this is how we can deploy it and move in that direction in terms of policy. So that is how I really see them playing an even greater role. And as I said, they play a fantastic role, but they must now become the drivers of and matched by the intellectual side of things in terms of spotting the opportunities for the country. Not just, as I say, crunching the numbers, but crunching the numbers in terms of where are we relative to our development trajectory. But equally, they also have a role to play in spotting the gaps outside of Barbados. Because as I mentioned, you have the different regions of the world, looking at the different financial entities, financial markets, and saying this is where we are going to go if we do X or if we do Y. I mean, they're doing that broadly, but it must now be done in terms of really helping us as policymakers to have real-time research. And it will call for a lot of capacity building on their part. Yes, they're highly qualified, but in order for us to be cutting edge, our economists and our economic team, as it were, have to be in constant mode of best-in-class training around the world. What are the new economic models? What are the areas that will allow for them to be able to spot the gaps and be able to respond in quick time?
No, you spoke earlier on investments and investment flows into the island. One of the challenges historically has been the ease of doing business, and it has not been easy for a lot of investors seeking to invest in Barbados. Ironically, you said one of the challenges for you since returning home has been the speed at which we do things.
You're right. It is an issue, and we have to address it frontally. And government, to its credit, has been trying its best to do so. But I think we have to find innovative ways of getting things done. So take, for example, it goes back to that question, as I said, of efficiency. A lot of our processes, listen, Barbados is a fantastic jurisdiction. We have all the right ingredients, but sometimes the processes that underpin the service delivery are antiquated, or we think that, okay, it's been done this way for the last 20 years, so it's perfect. Or sometimes what you hear, well, we've changed it 5 years ago, so therefore we're good. No, we have to be in a constant mode of change. I think once we can do that, we will be in the right direction. So the time that it takes, for example, to open a company, and we found this out with Senegalese, in hours, not a day or two, which is not what we can do in a company in Barbados. You can open a company in 1 to 2 days. But we have to move to the next level. And you have to therefore ask, what are the processes that are causing us to be to slow down being able to deliver, not just in Kaipo, but also I want to throw out the challenge that we should be able to measure, and it's something that I'm going to call for. If you go to a restaurant to buy a meal, you should be able to have a minimum time that from the time you enter to the time you receive your good, there is a standard of when that good is received. Because why? Once you can start to measure service, your economy will be competitive, it will grow. We need certainty in the market in those regards. So the ease of doing business will call for us to reimagine how do we deliver service to our people as well. How do we use technology to be able to deliver those methods as well? So you see, again, vision. Where do we want Barbados to go? But how do we get there? And you see that how do we get there? That is where a lot of the detail will have to come.
Government is putting a lot of resources into the hosting of the T20 Cricket World Cup. About $32 million being spent on renovating Kensington Oval alone. Again, we keep hearing about the spin-off benefits for the average Barbadians, but break down what is in it for the average Barbadian.
A lot. That's the first thing I'll tell you, a lot. And what does that look like? not only the legacy of saying we are holding another Cricket World Cup final, not only the fact that we'll have thousands of persons coming to our shores and spending critical foreign exchange here, not only the fact that millions of viewers around the world will be seeing Barbados, but Barbados will use the fact that we're hosting the World Cup here to be able to leapfrog on many areas in terms of technology. And I don't want to let all the areas out of the bag as yet, but we are in for some real changes that will enhance our infrastructure. It will enhance our persons being able to access all those persons coming here to offer them goods and services. We have an opportunity to expose our people to the world. And we're going to do so in a way that only Barbados can, in terms of using it as a place to promote investment. So I, for example, met with the Board of Invest Barbados, and I can assure you, and they're building it out, as persons come to Barbados, they will be able to see why are we a good place to do business. The real estate sector, the hotel sector, the cultural sector. And once you have all of the world focusing on us, the question is, what do we do with it? And it's not only for government to say, this is what we do with it, but our people now have to imagine and reimagine that to themselves. Okay, the World Cup is coming later this year. How can I tap into it? What are the benefits as well? So government is the enabler, okay? And the event is here. But again, our entrepreneurial spirit, our cultural spirit, our pride of being Bajans has to now kick in and say, okay, we have an opportunity. How am I going to maximize that? So, as I said, yes, you have thousands of visitors coming, critical foreign exchange coming, especially for the hotel sector, food and beverage. But the ordinary man on the street also has the opportunity to expose who they are in terms of their art, their craft, their music, okay? Having different events around the country. Tourists should be able to leave one part of Barbados and go to the next and see how we live, how we do, day-to-day stuff. But the imagination has to be there. And we have the example of 2007, and we now have to reimagine what we can do beyond that. So again, it requires us to take a step back and to think, okay, this is a moment in our time, and to really also say to the world, Barbados is a destination of big events. Barbados is a destination that has the capacity to attract the world, to entertain the world, and also to come and say, look, we's one people, come and enjoy your time here in a safe, sustainable environment.
Minister, given all that you've addressed, where we need to be, especially to be globally competitive, where do you see Barbados in the next 2 to 3 years, or short term?
Well, a country that continues to have reduced levels of unemployment, broader expansion of areas of opportunities for business, not just here, but a country that is really exporting a lot of its goods and services, a country that is now moving into the realm of being bilingual and multilingual, and also a country that